You were brought into existence by something far greater than what the eyes can see. Edgar Cayce understood this deeply. But could it be that he carried knowledge far beyond what he ever dared to reveal? Picture a man known as the sleeping prophet, who once agreed to an interview and encounter erased from records, wiped clean from archives, and it was in that forbidden conversation where he is said to have disclosed the most profound secret of all. Human beings are not merely the result of biological chance or evolutionary randomness. We are integral parts of a vast and intelligent design, carefully hidden from plain sight. Thousands sought Cayce's help. People would lie down, eyes shut, while he entered a semi-trance and whispered diagnoses describing not just ways to heal the body, but to restore the soul. Yet, beyond the four walls of his consultation room, quiet murmurs spread with an eerie insistence. Cayce had seen things no man was meant to witness. Eventually, he admitted it. His insights were not his own. He wasn't the source, but the vessel, a conduit linked to a higher intelligence, something that some might name God, while others would call it a force beyond religion. In his own words, all those sessions were merely preparation. The ultimate truth, the one capable of shaking the very foundation of reality, he kept until his final days. Allegedly, this controversial interview took place in 1944, during a time when his health was rapidly deteriorating. The only witness was his devoted secretary, who swore an oath never to disclose what she had heard. Yet some words are too powerful to remain buried with a man. Have you ever wondered why so many of Cayce's predictions came to pass? How he could describe illnesses with surgical precision, speak of lives and places he had never physically encountered? He never concealed his source, the Akashic records. He called them an invisible archive that holds everything that has ever happened, is happening, or will ever occur. But in that forbidden interview, he reportedly revealed something deeper. The Akashic records weren't merely a history, they were a blueprint, the original schematic upon which life on Earth was formed. To Cayce, the human being wasn't simply a combination of flesh, bone, and thought. We are vessels, and within each of us resides a fragment of the same force that shaped galaxies and birthed time. If you were truly aware of how close this force is to you, you would never again fear death, because, according to him, death is not an ending, it is a doorway, and behind that door lies your most authentic self. Are you among those who believe that religions are human inventions? Cayce countered this notion. He saw all religions as mere attempts to express the ineffable. Scriptures were reflections, dim echoes of a light anyone could perceive if only they had the courage to look inward. But these ideas he shared in whispers. He knew that if shouted too loudly, this truth would bring his downfall faster than any disease ever could. Hearing Cayce speak made it easier to grasp why many tried to erase his words from history. Because if people truly believed they were not victims of fate, not just biochemical machines on a pointless journey, if they believed themselves to be part of a divine force, who could possibly control them? During this same mysterious interview, he disclosed another crucial insight. What really weakens us? What cuts us off from this universal source? He explained that fear, envy, and hatred were not just fleeting human emotions. They were mechanisms, tools engineered to sever our spiritual connection. The deeper we sink into division and bitterness, the further we drift from the essence that gave us life. With closed eyes and a frail voice, Cayce described what he had seen. Beyond the veil of mortality, he claimed to have undergone the experience of death thousands of times, and every return reinforced a singular truth. On the other side, we are not lost, we go home, not to a golden heaven or fabricated paradise, but to a place of origin, a space we leave temporarily to learn within the constraints of a physical body. These truths pleased neither church, nor science, nor political powers, because they unraveled the foundations of control. If someone understands they cannot truly be destroyed, how do you govern them? If a person knows the divine lives within, who then can claim lordship over them? Toward the end of his life, Cayce's words became more peculiar, more elusive. He whispered of a time soon to come when people would begin to hear the voice of the source, without need for intermediaries, when the Akashic field would open itself to all who dared to listen. At the time, Those whispers were dismissed as hallucinations of a dying man, and yet, nearly a century later, what do we witness? A global movement of people turning inward, meditating, exploring altered states of consciousness, pursuing what some call mysticism, others label modern spirituality, and still others frame as depth psychology. But the essence is the same. Humanity is trying to remember, to rediscover what lies hidden not in temples or texts, but deep within. In that secret dialogue, Cayce is said to have spoken a truth so potent few dared repeat it. Everything you perceive as the world is merely scenery. Only the inner is real. And when your eyes close for the final time, you'll realize you've always known this. These words, though never officially transcribed, have survived in fragments. Pieces of that lost conversation still echo today, spoken in hushed tones. By those who once knew Cayce or were entrusted with parts of his knowledge. They repeat his phrases not out of reverence, but because they know truth, when pure, doesn't belong to anyone. It liberates rather than commands, and that's precisely what makes it so dangerous. It removes the need for hierarchy, for fear, for systems of obedience. It offers only one thing: freedom. That was the essence of the man the world tried to forget. But real memory cannot be destroyed like old paper or erased from servers. It burrows into the souls of those ready to hear the call. And when that question begins to stir, who are we, really? It's as though Cayce himself whispers again, not to be worshipped, but to awaken what already sleeps within. He believed each of us carries a hidden key, an invisible mechanism that unlocks a door to a realm where fear, pain, and isolation dissolve. And that key lies not in something we must find or build, but in something we must recognize within ourselves. It cannot be accessed through wealth, influence, or even intelligence. It responds to one thing only: the willingness to embrace the truth, even when it shatters the comfortable illusions we've built around us. Cayce once told his closest student that the greatest lie ever told was that we are alone, isolated in a vast, indifferent universe. In truth, he said, we are droplets of the same vast ocean, separated only by a thin film of illusion. He spoke these words in a voice barely above a whisper, but they reached those who needed to hear them. What followed was even more startling. He said that eventually, even the most rigid skeptics and staunch materialists would begin to sense the sign synchronicities that defy randomness, prophetic dreams, chance meetings that feel orchestrated by something beyond logic. These would not be coincidences, but gentle nudges from the source. People who had sessions with Cayce often reported strange aftereffects. Some recovered from illness is labeled incurable. Others radically changed their lives in ways that stunned their families. Yet there were also those who couldn't bear the weight of what they'd been shown. Because truth, when it arrives uninvited, doesn't just enlighten, it dismantles. It tears down the familiar walls of identity, ideology, and routine. And for many, it is easier to remain in the cage than to accept it was never locked. Cayce saw the world not as a place of punishment, but as a classroom. He insisted that suffering was never random cruelty, nor was it divine retribution. Instead, every hardship came with a hidden question: are you ready to remember who you are? Illness, poverty, heartbreak, none of it was a sentence. All of it was instruction, chosen, not inflicted, according to a private confession made by his secretary years later. Cayce once told her, if people truly knew who they were before birth, they would never mourn missed chances, because life, in his vision, repeats its lessons until we awaken, until we recall, not guess, not theorize, but remember our true essence. That same secretary claimed that over time, she too began to feel strangely attuned to the thoughts of others, as though she had become some kind of receiver, a channel connected to the same source that once spoke through Cayce in trance. But why did he fear releasing all of this during his life? Why did he call the interview forbidden? His answer was both simple and chilling. He wasn't afraid for himself, he feared for others. He understood that the truth could be lethal to those unprepared for it, that demolishing a person's worldview too quickly could destroy not just their beliefs, but their will to live. For many, he said, freedom is more terrifying than captivity, because the walls of our prison become familiar, even comforting. and what lies beyond them true liberty feels to vast two-handled dot in his final days. Cayce rarely slept. His family said he would lie still for hours, eyes closed, murmuring names and dates that made no sense to anyone else. Some believe he was settling old karmic debts. Others think he was planting seeds for the future. There are whispers that fragments of that lost interview are still protected, passed from hand to hand in silence. Portions that speak of a coming age, when humanity will begin to heal itself not through pills or surgeries, but through thought, through love, through remembrance. Cayce foresaw a time when disease would dissolve in the light of awareness, when fear would be replaced by understanding, and when death would no longer be feared because its illusion would be fully exposed. Imagine how different your life would be if you knew, without any doubt, that no one is above you, not a boss, not a priest, not even a ruler. According to Cayce, you are made of the same energy that sustains galaxies. It exists in your breath, your heartbeat, and those final thoughts before sleep overtakes you. And that's why, he said, the dream state was sacred. That was the space where the soul most easily reconnects with its source. Cayce called it diving into eternity. In sleep, he said, we return home beyond time, beyond memory, into pure being. There, we remember who we are, where we came from, and what awaits when our time in this body ends. He insisted that the idea of a divine origin wasn't poetic. Metaphor, it was literal. He claimed to have witnessed souls choosing their bodies and destinies the way actors select roles, and others, not yet ready, waiting on the edge of incarnation until they matured enough to step onto the stage. If this is true, then everything we call reality is just a scene, and we are performers who have forgotten our own script. But here lies the most unsettling part of Cayce's hidden confession. The play can be rewritten at any moment. Poverty, pain, illness, they aren't life sentences. They're plot lines, and if you authored them, then you can revise them. But, he warned, few people do. Only those who understand they are not just names or bodies or stories but extensions of the very source itself have the power to shift their destiny. Cayce never asked to be followed, worshipped, or canonized. He was wary of any spiritual path that fostered dependence. For him, the true teacher was the one who pointed inward, not toward himself. He believed the role of any guide was to disappear as soon as the other awakened. And perhaps this was the most radical gesture of his life, preparing people not to need him anymore, to help them recognize, on their own, that the divine is not in a temple or an ancient book, but in the quiet breath of every soul willing to listen. Maybe that's why so many tried to silence him. He could not be controlled. His message couldn't be tamed or packaged. It was fire, and fire, once lit, spreads. The kind of truth Cayce shared was not meant to gather followers, but to liberate consciousness. And that is always dangerous to those who profit from fear, guilt, or ignorance. In one of his final notes, never officially published, he wrote that the future of humanity would not depend on new religions, but on a new vibrational ethic, a way of living where every thought would be seen as creative, every word as a seed, every gesture as a prayer. He said a time would come when human beings would understand they become ill, when they lie to themselves, and that the physical body is merely a condensed reflection of the soul in disharmony. Healing, then, would come from an internal realignment not through dogmas, but through truth lived daily. Cayce described that the new spirituality would not require gurus, expensive retreats, or rigid doctrines. It would be quiet, intimate, organic. It would happen in how someone prepares food, cares for nature, or treats a stranger on the street. It would not be a spectacular experience, but a continuous presence like a subtle fragrance that follows those who have reconnected with their origin. Many called him mad, others a genius, but he himself rejected both labels. He said his only function was to serve as a mirror, because what frightened people about his words wasn't what he said, but what they awaken in others, the forgotten memory of something ancient, already there dormant. He said humanity's greatest sin was forgetfulness, forgetting who we are, where we came from, and why we chose to live so far below our true potential. There are accounts of people who, just by hearing his voice or reading his words, began to have lucid dreams with beings of light, memories of past lives. or a sense of reunion with something they could never explain. As if Cayce had only been the trigger of a chain reaction, one that could no longer be stopped once it began. But he warned, awakening is a painful process because it requires us to look at everything we've avoided: traumas, inherited patterns, decisions made out of fear, beliefs that imprison us. All of it surfaces, and many retreat at that point. Cayce understood this. He said you can't force a soul to awaken, but you can leave signs, clues, maps, and that's what, according to his most discreet admirers, he did with his life, scattered fragments of memory so that one day, when the world was ready, those pieces would form a new path. Today, decades after his passing, there is no shortage of books on his work. But Cayce's true legacy is not in the published texts. It is in the silences between the words, in the silent gazes of those who heard him and were never the same. It's in the simple actions of those who, upon remembering who they are, begin to live with more compassion, more clarity, more truth. Some say his energy still circulates, that his mission is not yet finished. Some believe he will return, or that he already has, in another form, in another body, in another time. But the truth is that he was never merely an individual. He was a frequency, and frequencies do not die, they merely change form, move through ages, and express themselves through new voices, new hands, new hearts. Cayce said that love was not a feeling, but a spiritual technology, the highest of all, a force field that dissolves fear and reconnects everything to its point of origin. That's why he often repeated, if you want to heal someone, love them in silence. It wasn't poetry, it was soul science. He knew that the vibration of love is more powerful than any speech, medicine, or external intervention. It's what remains when all words fail. It's what endures when the pain fades, and perhaps, at the core, this is his deepest inheritance, the calling to remember that we already are everything we seek, that there is no flaw in our essence, only forgetfulness, that the soul does not need to be saved, it needs to be heard, and that if we make enough silence within ourselves, we might hear, among the whispers of existence, that same voice that once spoke through Edgar Cayce, not to follow it but to recognize it as our own.